First one I've actually smoked since last recording. It's good. It's good.
Smoking my go-to, the good old Macanudo Cafe.
I don't think I said what it was. Olivier, Connecticut. I just left the cigar shop. I saw they have a limited Connecticut Olivier. I don't know what that means, but it's like $1 more. I didn't really research it. So, I was asked by a person who listens, what's a good beginner cigar?
I think anything light. Like, I don't think you want to jump into a big old dark Robusto.
Or a Maduro.
Yeah.
I think a Connecticut I think anything flavored is first off to start. Shout out to Josh Faggard, who only smokes, Black and Miles with the wood stick, with the wood tip.
He's got a pipe like you, both of you hipsters.
I need to do that on the pod.
Yeah.
I don't.
I have a pipe. I've never used it once.
I have 2 really expensive pipes. I have one from 1358 from England.
You should, because it's Christmas.
I will.
And you got Frosty the Snowman with his corncob pipe.
I have several corncob pipes. I have several.
Seriously.
I have a whole collection. I have a Savinelli one that's like $250. I've only smoked it one time. It was right after my grandfather's funeral. Yeah. That's the only time I've ever smoked it. I'll only smoke that on special occasions. And then I have multiple corncob pipes, probably 5.
All right. Well, one on the next pod for Christmas.
Yeah. But I have some tobacco that I've been aging in a tin for, I guess it's 4 years now. Mm-hmm. It's just chilling in that tin in a controlled, no sunlight. It's just in a controlled environment.
Okay.
As controlled as I can get it. So it's a Peterson. I don't know if you know much about tobacco or pipes. So it's a Peterson cut. It's a longer cut. And then it's been sitting now for 3 years. I'm going to wait till it gets to 10. And so every time I go to Abilene, actually the hat from the Leaf, I buy it from the Leaf. Every time I go, I buy another 10. So
my only experience with a tin of long cut tobacco is my great grandmother. She kept a tin of Garrett snuff.
Oh,
long cut. She'd have it right there on the iron
different
board.
different kind of tobacco for sure.
That was a different time altogether.
Where they had the patoons.
Yes,
the spit patoons. This kind of looks like a patoon, but
it does.
I've been eyeing it for a while. It's like, oh, that would feel perfect. I have some stickers that are being made.
It is on camera.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Some stickers that are being made. So
put
it on there.
That'll be good. I've gotten some more good feedback this week. We've been talking about feedback, and so I've gotten some good feedback for some people that they like the podcast, like our take on some things, and are excited to have a local, not that we talk so much about local politics, but some local people kind of talking about politics. And one of the guys, because some of my bourbon is in one of the camera shots, and he said, I love cigars, bourbon, and politics. Like, right up my alley. And I said, that's awesome. That is awesome. So that's good.
Well, and I think I've gotten some great feedback as well. I think that the interesting thing is we've been wanting to do this for a while. Mm-hmm. Both of our lives are crazy busy. Mine is slowing down a little. This is a very long cigar, by the way. Both of our lives are just kind of had to be the right moment, the right time. I think that it kind of fits perfectly with my life right now.
Yep.
At this season of life.
I just like that I'm excited to do it.
Same.
Something I look forward to.
Yeah.
So it's good to get good feedback and not scared to get the negative feedback too. So
gotten a little bit.
Which is, it's good. Constructive. Nothing, mean or y'all are stupid or anything like that. I don't know if you've gotten any of that. Mine's all been constructive.
Mine's all been constructive as well. So back to the cigar. I think a flavored cigar too. Maybe like a...
Now, do you ever smoke the cigarillos?
I have. I don't particularly like... This is going to make me sound like a cigar snob, but I don't really like anything flavored anymore. kind of moved past that.
Mm-hmm.
I used to really smoke like the vanilla. I can't even think of the name of them. And the cognac.
Oh yeah, those are the Tahiti ones.
Yes, but then the longer ones, kind of like this, but the thinner, long, thin ones.
I've got one of those on the humidor right now.
Yeah, and then my wife likes to smoke those.
Same.
Also, the Romeo and Julietas.
Mm-hmm.
I like those too. Like if I have a bunch of them. Like I have a 10 of them in the humidor, and they just sit there. So like if I just want to go outside real quick, and it has to be very fast because they burn quick. College football playoffs.
It's exciting. It was pretty cool. So I was out here working in the garage like I usually am on Saturdays, watching the 11 o'clock games. And then they had a thing up at the church for the Texas-Georgia game. So I went up there for the first half, took Benjamin. He's a big Georgia fan. That's my middle son. And so we watched the first half of that game. Then I had to come back and get ready because I had a company Christmas party that night. But you show up and everybody's watching the games on their phone, you know.
Yeah.
No, one of my friends went to SMU, and so he was really engrossed in that SMU game.
It's a great game.
It was a good game.
Both the Texas, Georgia, and the SMU Clemson game were great games.
Yeah,
Glad all 4 teams made it too.
Yes.
I was going to be disappointed if they threw Alabama in there.
I was too. I'm really glad SMU's in. I think that's super cool for them. I think we said, second year in the ACC. Mm-hmm. So I also think, I know there's a lot of old head SEC people talking trash about Texas, see, you came in here. But actually, my take, and I didn't go to Texas. I don't have a dog in this hunt.
Me either.
But my take was, yeah, it was Texas's first year in the SEC, and they made it to your championship game.
Yeah. Well, SMU's second year in the ACC.
But there's always been this rivalry of what's the better conference between SEC and Big 12, right?
Right.
And so, actually, SEC people, I wouldn't bring that up, that Texas lost to Georgia in the championship game, because what you're saying is Texas was in the championship game their first year in the SEC.
Yep.
So...
And I think Texas did a good job of preparing themselves for the SEC roster-wise. And Oklahoma has just not done very well. Or as well as I think some people expected. I don't think they've ever really recovered from Bob Stoops leaving.
Yeah. And again, I don't follow college football as well. So somebody who does, I think this is a dumb statement, but this is my take. I feel like Arch Manning being on the Longhorns makes Quinn Ewers a better quarterback.
Agreed.
I think there's just something about it that having those two guys makes that a good quarterback team. I think Sark is good. I've watched some games, and in my armchair quarterbacking, wouldn't have liked some of the calls that he's made. But like I say, it's been a good first year in the SEC. They made a good showing. Now they're in the playoff, and once you're in the dance, anything can happen. I
can't remember the bracket right off the top of my head, but I think that there is a chance that SMU and Texas can play each other down the road.
I didn't look at that. I know that
would be that's just a cool.
The only way Texas and Georgia would play again would be in the Natty, because they're both ends of the bracket.
I think it would be the semifinals if SMU and Texas were going to play.
Man,
can we go off topic for just a moment?
Just a moment.
So, our middle daughter has started playing club volleyball. Okay.
Following in Big Sis's footsteps. And she's good for her age. She still has a long ways to go. But we played rec ball, we played prep. Now we're stepping into the next phase. Can we talk about men's urinals for just a second? I know you saw that on the run sheet and you're like, what in the heck? So I'm trying to teach my son urinal etiquette. Oh, man.
Okay. And
I'm there with you on that.
The ladies, you may just want to mute this for, if any women listen to this, you might want to mute this for a few minutes.
Or if you have sons,
please teach them. Yeah. 1, you don't pull your pants down past your butt.
I can't get one of my kids to stop doing that.
It takes some time.
Yeah.
But when I walk in and I see a grown man with his pants below his butt cheeks, it's too much.
That's too much.
Just go into the stall.
Yeah.
Okay? It's okay. If that's a thing that you have, if you have a medical condition, I feel sorry for you. That's fine. That's great.
Yeah, we're not here for that.
But I don't want to have to answer questions from a 7-year-old when you ask that. Number 2, if there are 5 urinals, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you go to the first, the middle, and the last.
Yeah, 2 and 4 are not usable unless someone's at 2 or 4.
Or you just wait.
1, 3, and 5.
Now, if my son is with me and it's the little one and the big one, he goes to the little one, I go to the big one. No one stands in the middle one. You just either wait or you go to number 4.
You just wait.
And I mean, I can't tell you how many people just stand next to you. I don't understand.
You know what I don't understand? I don't understand the texting while you're peeing at the urinal.
We've had this conversation before.
Have we? Okay.
Or maybe it was in a text group.
It might have been.
Was it in the memes group?
Because I get it if you're going in the stall for some time. I saw a funny meme this week, and it was a guy that said, he said, you forgot your phone when you had to go number 2, and you're sitting there like the 1990s, taking a 1990s dump, like, where's the magazine or newspaper or something,
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, that's so true. Like, I get that. But I don't understand the standing at the urinal with the phone, like scrolling. I'm like, come on, man. Like, you shouldn't be there that long.
No, just please teach your sons first, third, fourth.
That's important.
Dads, you go to the first one, or son goes to first one, you go to second one, space third, fourth is open. Those are the rules. That's the etiquette.
Those rules do get thrown out the window at the airport, though. That's a busy bathroom. So you're stacking them up in there.
But then you're in a different cultural setting.
Yeah.
Okay, when you go into an airport, there's different cultures. Cultural setting is different. When there's a bunch of dads who have the same outcome, you just wait.
Yep.
You just wait.
I'm with you.
So, anyways, there's my. It just really irritates me, and I don't really know why.
Etiquette's important.
It is, and especially urinal etiquette. And I don't know why. Like, I walked in, and I'm like, oh, but it happened like 4 times because you're there for 14 hours. So you're going to go to the restroom a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways, my rant is over. So, kind of a slow week for domestic politics.
Yeah, some non-political news. I actually had further down the run sheet just kind of an update on nominations, because there have been some. Are you on Truth Social?
No.
I got on it very recently just because that's Trump's number one platform, obviously because he owns it. And that's where he tweets out all of his, like even the smaller nominations, because there's a few hundred that he will directly nominate. Some of his people will make nominations that'll go to his desk. Gotcha. But all the smaller stuff, he tweets every single time he nominates. He says so-and-so is going to serve as. So I've been kind of following that to keep up with it. So there's been a lot of... I don't know how that works, because I see some of his stuff on X, but not near as much as on Truth Social.
Really?
Yes.
Maybe I need to get on it.
Like, if you can go to his page on X, you'll see some tweets, and a lot of it, that's his commentary. But like on Truth Social, if you go right now and look at the feed, there's 5 or 6 in a row of so-and-so is going to serve as the next, so-and-so is going to serve as the next. It kind of gives a little bit about them. So it's a lot of the lesser type nominations, advisors, a lot of people in the White House counsel's office this week. So there's been activity. He's been putting people in place, but it's the big names are taken. Mm-hmm. I mean, we know who those are going to be. So, yeah, I agree. It's settling in a little bit. Plus, you are getting close to Christmas. I mean,
yeah, Congress
is going home.
Yep.
They'll come back and certify the Electoral College, and we'll have an inauguration, and off we go.
And I think, too, I feel like, anyways, and this is something kind of piggybacking off of what we finished on about the revolution and political and what that means and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we're in an era of so much information that has come out over the last decade, and we've been bombarded. And now that it's kind of slowing down a little bit, because we've had such a tense 8 years, 12 years, that, I would say even from 2008, 2001, it's always been tense for a while. I'll just say that. I could probably even go back to the 90s,
Yeah.
But it feels like a lot of times we have this underlying doom coming, and that seems to have subsided a little bit. And I think it has to do with media.
Mm-hmm.
I think it has to do with, The View is being fact checked, and MSNBC, we'll talk about that in just a second with his interview. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's kind of peaked, maybe. Maybe peaked's not the right word, but we're kind of at a point where it doesn't seem like there's a doom coming, if that makes sense. I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah, I think some of the fear mongering has subsided.
Yes, that's a good word.
And we talk about MSNBC and even kind of across the board, there's been some good interviews.
Yeah.
Now, there's some snarkiness there.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the questions are kind of snarky and have an agenda behind them.
100%.
But even some of these like more left-leaning and liberal type media interviews of not just Trump, but other people, not cabinet nominees, you can't find them.
Yeah.
They are not doing interviews.
And I think that's intentional.
Yeah, it's got to be.
100%.
But you see some of these left-leaning and liberal media groups asking actual questions, and there's a bent to them. But here's the thing. Trump is sharp. J.D. Vance is sharp. And a lot of the people that surround and his team are sharp, and they're able to answer those questions. And so I think it's great because it's putting those answers to those questions and the ideology and the solutions for the new administration out there in front of people who normally would not have access to it or see it.
And I think, too, we're in an era where there's always been so much information, and now that it's kind of slowing. I don't know. That's kind of a repeating of myself, but it's just an odd, like, I feel like it's kind of an odd moment.
Yeah.
Like, it's not going to last. I mean, something crazy will happen. And internationally, we've had lots and lots of things going on. But politically, domestically, we haven't had a ton. And it's the time of year, one, but it's just kind of weird. Because the last two presidential election cycles have been just vicious at each other's throat. And we are not used to that.
Mm-hmm.
We are not used to that. And that's a good thing. We both talked about a couple of weeks ago about the transfer of power being peaceful and the transitionary teams already communicating with each other. And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And I think that is going to happen. With his interview, a couple of things that I found interesting is 24 hours after it had been posted on MSNBC's YouTube page, it had 1.4 million views.
Wow.
Okay. Now, this is, again, Trump being interviewed by MSNBC.
Mm-hmm.
Joe Rogan's interview with him in 24 hours had 10 million views.
Yeah, a lot more.
So I was thinking, like, man, like, why is there such a difference? One, I thought, okay, well, maybe the subscribers were different. You know, like maybe Joe has, the JRE experience has more subscribers to MSNBC. It's comparable. I think MSNBC had 12 and Joe's has 15. So it's pretty comparable. So the only thing that kind of came to my mind is it goes back to the legacy media, right? MSNBC is legacy media and Joe Rogan is a new age media. And I think that shows the power of those types of interview process. Like Theo Vaughn's interview with J.D. Vance, last time I checked, it was well over 10 million views. And that's a lot. Like, that's a lot of people watching that.
I feel like the podcast interviews this last election cycle kind of surprised us for their impact. I don't think they will in 4 years. I think the next president and as long as this medium is here, because everything's always changing, but I think the next president and the president after that and probably the president after that will go through what we'll kind of define as a podcast circuit. Like it used to be, a sit down was for 60 minutes. Like that used to be the gatekeeper to the presidency. It's not anymore. And I think that kind of surprises us today. I don't think
it surprises me and you, though, right? Like, I'm not surprised by that.
I am surprised by the impact.
Oh, not me. Not me at all. Not even a little bit. And again, it goes back to COVID, like I talked about before. Like in COVID, like that's where I got my news. Like, Rogan was bringing on people. Tucker Carlson stepped into the game pretty quick. Ben Shapiro was out there. And I'm just saying, like, those are guys that I would tune into because at least I knew they were going to tell me their truth.
I just had a thought about why I think I might disagree with you now that we're talking this out. I don't think I realize how old I am. And like how much my generation is now the voting demographic.
100%.
So I think when I said it surprised me, is like, I know I listen to Joe Rogan. I know I take in podcasts. And I know a lot of people my age do the same thing. I guess what I'm not considering is how much now of the voting demographic that we are and the generation and two above us, I don't want to say are dying off. I don't want to say like that, but
it's true.
They're
like that's
smaller.
That's the
generations
reality.
are getting smaller than they were 4 years ago, 8 years ago, 12 years ago. So I don't know what the biggest voting. I should. That's easy to look up. What the biggest voting demographic was.
I mean, it's got to be
election.
55 to 35. Are you just talking about age?
Yes.
Yeah, 55 to 35 has always been kind of that key demographic.
And if you think about that, that's 7 to 13 years on either side of my age. So
correct.
Right in the smack dab middle. So that does make sense.
And I think too, like, I got so tired of the doom and gloom all the time on news media. Like, again, especially during COVID, like literally it was like red band down at the very bottom with the ticker of how many people had died.
Yeah.
And like, not only was that traumatic for me, but that's traumatic for my children,
Yes.
And so that really pushed us away from those style of news because I wanted my kids to be able to enjoy this moment because we were never going to be able to have that moment again where we were home alone, like with nothing to do.
Yeah.
And so I recognized that very early, but I also didn't want it to seem like we weren't paying attention to the news either. So we would have it on at times, mostly local, to hear what Governor Abbott was going to say or whatever. But I think that was the moment where it shifted because I didn't want my kids to be traumatized. And so for us, like we would just check it out. Then I'd check on Twitter or whatever. And then I would listen to podcasts. And so because I knew at least they were going to tell me somewhat of the truth or I was going to get some kind of information at least.
Yeah, not only that, but we've, beat this horse quite a bit. But the podcast element gives you such a deeper dive, and I think that's what's desired.
Oh, yeah.
When you're talking about segments, you're talking about traditional news media, you're talking about what you can fit in between commercial breaks. So you're talking about 6 or 7 minutes at a time with a guest. You cannot, you can get the snips, the sound bites, but that's not news. That's not what I want to hear. Whereas if you give me 2 hours on a podcast, 3 hours on a podcast, even just an hour on a podcast, you can dig down and get some information. And that's what I want. And
Right.
I think that's what a lot of people want.
Well, and I think too, we've talked about, I mentioned this, I either thought it or I said out loud, I can't remember. But a podcast is essentially a lecture series by a person who's an expert at something.
Yeah.
Right? I don't think you and I really consider ourselves to be political experts. We're just two guys that
No, let's just talk.
just like to talk to each other and have a good time and understand each other. But like when I'm listening to someone who, hardcore history, right? He is an expert in the field. Dan Carlin. He's an expert in that field. And so I'm essentially listening to a lecture series. And prior to podcast, I would have to go sit at a university for 2 hours, 3 hours and get the same thing.
Right.
And so now it's a free medium of education.
It is.
So he talked about on the Trump talked about in the interview about the federal minimum wage being raised. I guess I didn't realize it was still $7.25. I just assumed it was more than that. He made a great point that in some states we wouldn't be able to dramatically raise the minimum wage. He brought up Mississippi and Alabama.
Yeah, I heard that part.
I think in our state, I don't think anybody pays the federal minimum wage in most, like I would say like 95% of the jobs out there.
Not post-COVID, but pre-COVID, yeah. I mean, if you're a high school kid working at Sonic, or a restaurant where you're not a server, you're washing dishes or whatever, you're getting paid minimum wage. And that's just, now you have opportunity for raises and to move up like anybody else, but it does work as a floor kind of for that. I don't like a minimum wage at all. I especially don't like a federal minimum wage. I think it's price floor. You know this from any time we've taught economics, but price floors and price ceilings generally don't have their intended effect. I believe now COVID changed this because the marketplace got a lot more competitive.
Correct.
Because a lot of people didn't want to go back to work. So
Correct.
The ones who did were in a better place to negotiate higher wages. That's what, like it or not, living in a free market, that's what it's supposed to be like.
Correct.
So there are some people out there making $7.25 an hour because that's the federal minimum wage. They could be making more, but it sets that floor. It doesn't have that intended effect. It actually holds down
Correct.
Wages. So
Well, in our area, we have a Buc-ee's that opened.
Yeah.
And
they pay really well.
They pay really well. I mean, it starts at $15 an hour. I mean, I can't imagine being a 17-year-old kid making or I guess you have to be 18 to work at that place, but making 18 to, $20 an hour. And like, if you work on a weekend, it's another $1. If you work nights, it's another, if you work the third shift, it's another $1.
Yeah.
Like, and then holidays are time and a half. And,
I mean, I hear you, but here's my unofficial economic metric. When we were making minimum wage in high school for the high school job, that's about what your trip through the Jack in the Box drive-thru cost you.
Fair.
Now it is closer to that $15.
Mm-hmm.
So
fair.
I think the same way. I'm like, if my daughter babysits and she does that and she doesn't work at like a restaurant or something like that for her high school job. And I think, if she was 18 and worked at Buc-ee's and made $18 or $20 an hour, I'm like, that's more than I made. But not just speaking about the inflation of the past few years, but the inflation since I was her age.
Oh, for sure.
That's
for sure.
That's it's not a ton.
It's not a ton of money.
And I mean, thinking about just going to the movies, think about things that kids spend their money on.
Okay, so talking about high school. I don't know if you remember this, but we went on a double date one time, and
sure I do.
We went. Do you remember this?
No.
Do you remember this? Okay, we went to the movies. Okay, it was an old Cinemark.
Are you telling stories about me?
No, I'm not going to tell names or anything like that. But just about the money. So, my dad gave me $20. Okay, $20. That was for food, movies, and gas.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking to myself, if I gave my daughter $20 now, she wouldn't even be able to get in the movie.
That's 1.5 tickets on a Friday or Saturday night.
And that's if you don't get the special seats or whatever.
Special seats. That's just walking in to watch a regular movie. Yeah, it's crazy.
And
I feel like we're like my grandparents when I was growing up. Be like, I remember when hamburgers were a nickel. Like, yeah, go to bed, Grandma.
Yeah.
Like, now I'm that
but we
person.
are. I mean, like, I think about it too. Like, I remember one time I was pumping gas and it was 99 cents.
When I started driving, that's what it was, and it took forever to go over $1. I think there was a stigma about it having to go over 99 cents. But when I started driving, I drove a diesel and it was 99 cents a gallon.
And like, it makes me feel old.
Yeah,
it makes me feel old when I'm excited for gas to be below 250. I'm like, yes, fill them up. It makes me feel old, and so like those are things too, like that. I wonder if we ever get back to that. What happened? I can't see it.
Aubrey's about to kick another field goal. I need that second field goal. I need to get a mirror up here so you can see the screen. So for those on the podcast, I face towards the TV, not really on purpose, but it is nice whenever we are recording on a Monday night and the Cowboys are playing on a Monday night. But
did he make it?
They hadn't kicked it yet. I guess they
called a timeout.
Looks like a timeout. He's running off the field. What are we doing?
End of the quarter.
End of the quarter. He just went out there.
But I also wonder too, like, what will my kids' nostalgia moments be?
Yeah.
Because I mean, that's what we're talking about, and I want them to have them, but I also like want them to be able to relate to what the struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I think also in that MSNBC interview, he talked about Jerome Powell won't be removed as a Federal Reserve chair. What do you think about that?
I'm fine with it. I don't have a problem with Jerome Powell. He acted too slow when COVID happened, but that's what Trump wanted him to do. He didn't want him to raise rates fast enough. They should have raised rates more quickly. That's my hot take. That's just my opinion. People will disagree, but they should have started to slow down the economy faster to keep inflation in check. So, but when he learned that, they raised them very quickly, and that had a pretty negative effect to correct it.
Right.
Where every time the OEOB meets, they're raising rates. So I don't have a real problem with Jerome Powell, just because, like, the Fed chair, like, they're still subject to the Board of Governors. They don't act alone, and he's a pretty run-of-the-mill, middle-of-the-road guy, and it looks bad. Trump can't remove him.
Well, in the interview, she asked if you would fire him, and he said no. And he said his response was, if I asked him to leave, he would.
Yeah.
but I'm not going to.
But Jerome Powell said if he was asked to leave, he would
He
not.
would say, yeah. And I think that that's probably a conversation that they had. I mean, I'm sure that there's some political banter going on, political jabbing going on there. But if the president comes out and says, Jerome Powell, you have to go, I think he would probably step down. But I don't know a whole ton about that role as far as within the government.
He's fine. And this is one of those areas where I'm going to look more liberal than conservative. You don't want the super conservative guy as the Fed chair. You want a pretty middle of the road guy as Fed chair, because it takes both sides and, for lack of a better way, both ideologies to make our monetary policy work. You need someone who is going to be able to ride that conservative side when that's what's good for the economy, and you need someone who's going to be able to push a little more liberal when that's what's good for the economy. It's not one of those things where I want the most conservative person I can find in that role. That's not what you want.
Well, and you definitely don't want a yes man in that position.
Yeah.
So I think,
and he's a CEO, sort of, not literally, of
figuratively,
the board of governors of the 12 Federal Reserve districts.
Right.
And so it's you.
Do we want to run down that rabbit hole?
No.
Of the Federal Reserve.
But you've got to be essentially. Oh, you made it good. You've got to be able to.
One more, fans. We have one more. We need Burrow to throw 70 yards.
He's probably. They just threw it down the field. But he threw an interception. So I don't know. But you need, on the Federal Reserve, you need somebody who can rein in these board of governors and keep them. It's kind of like Congress, where you have a lot of different opinions and a lot of different types of policy.
Yeah.
But you got to be able to work together. And so your reserve chairman needs to be able to get people to work together for the policy to work. You don't need politics gumming up the works of your monetary policy, because the way our economy works, the way a free market economy works, is the Federal Reserve has to be able to respond. You want capital to be liquid in our free market economy, so companies have access to capital so they can expand and grow their businesses. So that's what the Fed chair should do. That's what he has done. I got no problem with him staying.
So, question, because this is where my mind went. So there's 12 Federal Reserves chapters. Is that what you said? Districts. So they meet and decide what monetary policy is going to be, and what monetary policy basically means is what rates are going to be. Right.
What rates are is not like what you're paying for your mortgage. That's not what we're talking about.
I realize that.
Yeah,
it's what
banks pay.
Banks pay on their interest of the loan that they take out.
Right. So forever and ever and ever before COVID, and really for too long.
It was zero, right?
Yes, it was. Well, it's always a range. So it was zero to 0.25%. So you say 0 to 25 basis points. So that's why for all those years after the housing crisis in 2009, 2010, older people were used to going to the bank, being able to put their money in there and getting a good return on like a CD or like a savings account. And everybody's like, my savings account's paying 0.1%. It's not paying nothing. Well, banks aren't going to pay you more than they can go borrow money from the Fed.
Correct.
So when rates are that low, then they can go borrow money from the Fed. They're not going to pay their customers more interest than they're going to pay the Fed, on their savings accounts. Now, that's why savings accounts, the CD rates are back up.
Correct.
Because that Fed funds rate is what it's called, has increased. And I think it'll settle back.
What is it right now?
Into the twos.
Do you know?
No, it's in the fours. I think it'll settle back around the twos eventually. I think mortgage rates will settle back around 4. And I think that's where you'll see them in a quote-unquote good and elastic economy. You'll see mortgage rates around 3.75% to 4%. I don't think you're going to see these like I'm sitting in like a 2.5% rate right now.
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to see that again, because whenever inflation happens, it doesn't give you anywhere to go.
Correct.
You've got to have some wiggle room. But I don't know.
Interesting. My mind wasn't prepared for that conversation.
Mine either.
And I could think too, like when I listen to people talk about the Federal Reserve and like how that affects it, just my brain just doesn't mix. It meshes. It just molds into this. Blah, 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 blah. That's what my brain hears and my ears hear. Because I just don't understand it, because it's not my world.
FOMC. Federal Open Market Committee.
And that's like, so like when I see a Jerome Powell on the news and he's talking about rates rising, I'm like, oh, okay, good, bad? Question mark. I'm not sure. So the other thing that was kind of a contentious point in that MSNBC interview was mass deportation. First off, I don't, this is not a hot take. This is not if you are here illegally, we've got to figure out a way to get you here legally. If you are a criminal, then you have to be deported.
Yeah.
That's my take.
Gots to go.
There's no ifs, ands, or buts. Now, he was very clear that it wasn't just coming from the southern border, it's also coming from the northern border. He was very clear that tariffs, that was a big conversation in that thing. I don't really want to hop into that. We talked a lot about that already.
Yeah.
But I think that mass deportation is a rough go. I don't know that we can really, I don't know how that would work.
And that's part of that fear-mongering thing that I think is kind of backed off some, because during the election and the run-up to the general, you had people saying, oh, he's going to be banging on doors and, militarizing the FBI to go in. And that's not going to happen. No, I mean, if the FBI is going in to get somebody, it's because they broke the law.
Correct.
And I think that's probably an appropriate approach. I don't think you're going to say, all right, let me find everybody who's here illegally right now. Like, I don't think that's going to be the focus. I think it's going to be now when someone is found here illegally because they've been arrested for doing something else. That's who's going to be deported.
Correct.
That's my take on it. Not only do I not think that he just would go in and knock on doors, bang on doors, and just haul everybody out. Not only do I think he just would do that, I don't think he would do that. Also, like, how the heck do you do that?
Yeah.
Like, logistically think about this. Like, that's not going to happen.
So I've after I had a conversation with someone, I don't know if we want to say names or not, I was talking to them about, he was expressing concern about that. And as he's telling me this, I'm just thinking, I just don't see how that's feasible.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're really concerned about them coming and getting laborers in the fields and in the construction areas. And I just don't know that that's feasible, one. But two, if they're not breaking the law, they really don't have a reason to go after them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if they're here and they're, trying to live the American dream, then just leave them alone. And then, like, let's figure out a way from here. Like, here's our line. We've drawn it. You can come in and you can seek asylum if you are a refugee, or you can come in and have your green card and you can work and pay taxes and do all those things. But we have to have a start. And right now, we really don't even have a start. It's just been mass chaos for the last 4.5 years.
Yeah. And
I don't know that it's going to, I don't know if it's going to change. And so one of the things that I was talking with another person about, because this person that I know works very closely with the police departments and state police, is just like, how do you start identifying people? Like, how do you go away from fake IDs? How do you go away from, a person who has 4 or 5 names when our registry only has 3? Yeah. Culturally, Hispanic people have more than 3 names. Right. And so how do you fix that issue? And so one of the things that I was discussing with another person about of security is like retinal scanning. Like, is that the future? Or thumbprints? Like, is that the future? And, is that a way of identifying ourselves? If you walk up and you get pulled over, instead of pulling out your driver's license, the police officer just scans your retina. Like, I don't know what people think about that, but
I think they're going to hate it.
But I'm just saying, like, any additional intrusion into the freedom of the public is going to be difficult. However,
that's the reason I don't ever do the Ancestry.com thing, because
I don't want them to have my DNA either.
Yeah, so I feel the same thing. Probably
all they could do though is just go to your trash and pull our cigars, and they get it.
They could. But the other side to that is on people who are here illegally. Like, do you have that data? Like, as far as,
are you asking me or just in general?
Like, in general, I don't think they have that. I think there's a couple ways to approach it. If you are, especially if you're a violent criminal, I think that's just a quick one-way pass.
Yeah, he said 13,000, over 13,000 of them.
Yeah, I think that's quick. I think if you're here working, but you came over here illegally, then I think there should be a path for you to stay and work and pay taxes. Because that's the thing. I feel like when you talk to people that have a problem with, that they really feel strongly about illegal immigration being a problem, they feel like, hey, these people are here using social services and they're not paying any taxes for that. So here's the thing. Okay, if you're here illegally but you're working, here's your path.
Right.
Keep working, because obviously if you have a job and you're working, we need you doing that job. Okay, do that job, but you're going to start filling out some tax returns. You're going to do your part as a citizen. You're going to be at the back of the line, but you have a way for citizenship. And that's what we've talked about on a really early podcast, was that process has to get more streamlined. And honestly, you talk about what Doge can do. Maybe Doge can look at that and say, if somebody's here actually working, if we can get some identifying information on them, then let's work a system where they have a faster path to citizenship that's not 12, 13, 14 years, so that they can become a citizen more quickly and continue working and be a productive member of society.
And I think that that will definitely be the path that it goes, I think. That's my prediction. I think that Doge will take that government efficiency role in identifying people and making sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. I don't know how you do it quickly, though. It goes back to the tariffs and things like that. How do you, this is not a 4-year fix. This is just the first step.
Yes.
And so like that kind of transition's that's actually a great transition into this next thing. So one of the things he talked about was how bad Obamacare is. Okay. There was an assassination last Monday or Tuesday, whatever day it was last week. They just got the guy this afternoon.
I saw that.
But is Obamacare to blame for this type of stuff happening? Because now we've created a system to where insurances can make tons and tons and billions of dollars off of other people. And I don't know what the answer is. And this is the problem that I have. I didn't feel sorry for the CEO.
You don't?
Mm-mm. And that's a problem for me. Like, empathetically, I feel sorry for him as a human.
Mm-hmm.
I feel sorry for his family. He apparently has a couple kids. But the position that he holds, if what they're saying really is true, then like they denied claims at 150% more than some of the other ones, some of the other insurance companies. And I when I first saw that, I'm like, oh man, that's kind of crazy. This guy got assassinated in broad daylight. This is like a movie.
Right.
And then as more information came out, like apparently he had just declined some kind of major thing. Now this is prior to them finding out who the guy was. And now today it turns out, I read an article today that apparently the guy who killed him had some kind of major back surgery, that he had to have him a surfing injury or something along those lines. And it's still not super clear, like exactly what happened, but I hate that. Like, I hate that I don't feel sorry for the guy. Should I? Like, that's the question that I'm asking myself. Like, if it's true, you made $40 million. That's what his paycheck was last year. And he gets a bonus for every, denial that they make. I don't know. It's just
every time they don't have to pay. That's right.
It's what's crazy to me is like I see something like this and like, who's to blame for this? Like, I know the guy that if we remove the assassination person, the person who murdered the guy, like if we remove that from it, how do we keep this from happening again? Because it's going to. Like, this is, especially if they don't catch the guy. Like, I know that they've supposedly arrested the guy, and apparently he's like he came from Penn State, not Penn, like University of Pennsylvania.
So
not
an Ivy Leaguer.
Yeah, Ivy League kid, came from a wealthy family.
Right.
And none of his social media talks about how, death to the healthcare system, things like that. You know what I mean? Like that you would expect to see from a person who assassinates another human. And so I'm just like, why? Then on the bullets, apparently it said, I wrote it down so I can make sure I got it right. Defend, deny, depose. Like, is that true? Like, if he really did that, like, who's to blame for that? And so I'm going to lead that back into immigration. This is the first step. Whatever Trump does with immigration has to be the first step. Just like I think Obamacare was the first step to trying to fix the healthcare system. And now we have to adjust because we now know we're 20 years in and it didn't work.
Yeah.
So now how does the system manage itself to where we don't have CEOs getting assassinated? Okay. I'm going to also make another jump and then I'll stop talking for a second. No Child Left Behind is not working, right? So we're now 25 years into this. We have to adjust. And so how do we create government? How does government step into these systems like the healthcare system, like the educational system, like the tariff and tax system? How do we adjust those to make them more functional and more helpful to the American public?
Well, I think it's useful to have 20 years of Obamacare. I'm not saying it was a good move, but to see how that did not work.
Correct.
There are going to be plenty of people who are conservatives, usually vote Republican, who will say, well, I like this, and these things of Obamacare. I like that my kids' child appointments are now free. They're not free. That's the problem is you think, oh, okay, well, because of Obamacare, like, hey, take a look at how much your insurance premiums have gone up and then ask your child's pediatrician, what's your cash price? Now, take your kids and their child appointment they get once a year. Take that, maybe it's $150. I think that's what our pediatricians, if you don't have insurance and you walk in the door.
It's somewhere between $75 and $150. It seems to be
Say
normal.
you have 3 kids, $450. Your insurance premiums have gone up more than $450 for the year.
100%.
So is it free? It's not. And so if you're going to come at me and say, well, these are the good things about Obamacare, it's woman visits are not. No, they're not. Like, that's getting paid for. Like, there's the number one rule of economics, right? There's no such thing as a free lunch.
Yeah.
So I think it is helpful, like you talked about how you make the change, to have this time under Obamacare, this time under No Child Left Behind, to see what didn't work and why it didn't work and be able to make that case. Because you'll have, for moderate Republicans, opposition to changes to Obamacare, to changes to No Child Left Behind. So, and you cannot have that opposition and get anything done in Congress. So while it wasn't good, and while the desired effect was not what we wanted for either one of those laws, it's good to have this hindsight to look back and say, this didn't work, and here I can show you how. And then you have a little more ground to stand on when you're trying to make the change.
And I think that's where we're at with school vouchers, and nobody wants to admit it, right? There's so much bureaucracy in education. It's absolutely unbelievable.
Did you see this is going around, and maybe just because I've been talking about it and the phones listen to us, but did you see that graphic where it shows the increase in staff versus admin?
Yeah.
What were those numbers? It was crazy, and of course, it's just something I saw on the internet.
Okay, so if you're watching on camera, it went like this.
In your experience as a teacher, have you seen that big of a jump in admin positions in the district? And maybe not just your district. It's probably hard.
I think I'm going to generalize. Okay, right. So the number, the graphic I saw, and I'll look at the camera. It went math and reading numbers went like this. It stayed pretty level. Mm-hmm. Some spikes, some dips. Teacher numbers it increased ever so slightly, and this is national averages. And then the amount of money dumped in is like this. It increases significantly.
Yeah.
And the amount of administrative increased significantly. But the reality is, and this is, my teacher friends are not going to like this, but my friends that are admin are going to like this, is the amount of bureaucracy and paperwork that has to be done is ridiculous. If you've never looked at a taper report for an education for one district, it's like 50 pages for just one part of that. And there's like 30 parts of it. And it's required. Like, it's not like you have to pull all this data every single time. And that's going to be super boring to talk about.
Yeah.
But it's like right in my wheelhouse. I love that, looking at that stuff. But the problem is now we have all this data, but what are we going to do with it? Mm-hmm. Right? Okay, so little Johnny is now in the 8th grade and is reading at a 3rd grade level. Well, why? Well, We all know why, because little Johnny was moved 4 times, and, you know, dad is in prison, and mom has to work 3 jobs, and, you know, he just is basically surviving by himself. Well, dadgummit, we had those same kids when we were in school too.
Yeah.
And how did they survive? Well, everybody just kind of pulled them along and helped them. But we can't do that anymore. They have to be, you know, there has to be so much documentation and da-da-da-da-da, and which is not a bad thing. But the problem is there's now, instead of, you know, someone coming in and saying, hey, Johnny, like, let's go. You have to turn your work in, or we're going to hold you accountable. You're putting them in this thing and this remedial program and this program and this program. And each one of those programs requires so much paperwork and documentation and people. So the short answer is yes, I have seen an increased amount of people in admin. Not all of it is unnecessary. Now, in the bigger districts, you're going to see more because there's more kids.
Right.
And in the small schools, you don't see enough of it. But the problem is those middle ground schools between big 2As and mid-sized 4As, they're all understaffed. And the problem is there's too many kids but not enough funds. And how do you redistribute that? That's a bad word for a conservative podcast, but how do you redistribute that money or whatever you want to call it to make sure that everybody's needs are met? But the same goes into the healthcare system.
Yeah. What you're talking about right now reminds me of my line of work. And so I'm going to ask a question, but there aren't a whole lot of small banks anymore. I'm a bank auditor. And one of the reasons why there aren't a lot of small banks anymore is because it's really difficult to be a small bank and comply with the regulation that you have to comply with. You have to hire people or outside third parties like me to help you meet all the rules. And the rules do increase as the bank gets bigger, so there is some of that. But, you know, after the financial crisis in 2008, 2009, 2010, you saw a dramatic drop in banks. And you had like 8,000 banks at that time. You have a little over 4,000 now. There hasn't been a new bank charter since that time. So now you've had new banks, but that's them going in, buying a small little bank and using their charter, but they change the name and make it their own. You see that a ton. But that's because of regulation. So
we saw that in our own town.
You just wonder if education's the same way. Like, you need all the administration to comply with all the regulation. If you can cut the regulation back, then you don't need that. Because I tell my banks all the time, there's a certain threshold of asset size you get to, and I say once you get to that asset size, a whole trigger of rules come into play. And it's not a very big asset size. You're talking about pretty small community banks. I'm not going to just talk numbers here because that's boring on the podcast.
What is the number, though? I'm kind of curious.
$1 billion in assets.
Okay.
Which $1 billion in assets sounds like a lot. That's not a lot.
But to a bank, that's not a lot of money.
That's not a lot in assets. So
to you and I, that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money, yeah. But
hey, if we got $1 billion, we ain't doing this podcast in your garage.
Yeah, that is your run-of-the-mill, a few locations, kind of in a region of a state community bank. That's got a handful of locations. That's your size of $1 billion bank. That's a small hometown bank a lot of times. The regulations increase dramatically when you hit that number. And so what I tell my banks is, don't stay there. If you just want to stay there and kind of have your slow growth, buddy, you're going to pay, because it gets real expensive at that point. So you really need to grow through that and get up to that 2.5, $3 billion where you start seeing some relief. Well, then a whole new trigger starts at $3 billion. So it's kind of,
is that fine-tuned number somewhere between like 2.5?
Yeah, I think once you get to
299.
Yeah, but the change at 3 is not as big a deal as far as what you're doing. Just the scrutiny is more.
Gotcha.
So I just tell people it's kind of like that way. Like, so I can understand what you're saying, how the smaller districts have an issue with that, because you don't have the money for the staff, but you're having to comply with the same rules.
Yep. And I think that's the problem that you're seeing with some of these schools that are struggling. But then the next issue is you have these super schools, that super districts, I'll call like DISD, Houston ISD, San Antonio ISD, some of those really big, El Paso, Amarillo to a certain extent. Those ones are struggling as well because they're too big. And back to the late 2000s, they're too big to fail because there's so much there. And my fear is twofold about the voucher system. I will get into this at another date, but if it starts to get closer to it, is if you pull money from those big districts, like a district like mine that I work in is a pretty, I don't want to say overly affluent district, but we're okay, right? The town we live in is okay. It's not going to go away. But what I fear is if you have that big district that's struggling already and you allow these people you hand them the voucher system and you say, whatever it looks like, I'm not exactly sure what it's going to look like yet because it hasn't been put into, there's been some bills, but not enough to really dive into the details. But if we look at that and they start pulling those kids and the money out of those districts, but then also you're going to pull the money out of the small districts.
Yeah.
Where this small district has been around for 150 years and has been functioning just fine, except for the last 15 years because of the regulation and the amount of money that they have to pour into it. And they're going to falter.
Yeah.
That's my fear, is the super big economically disadvantaged schools in the more rural communities. And it kind of surprises me that you're not seeing more pushback from the super big schools, districts, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio. I don't think you're seeing enough pushback from them. And I don't know that they really realize, like, if your kid is right on the verge of going to like Dallas, right? If you're right on the verge, I can go to Plano, or I can go to Mesquite, or I can go to McKinney, or I can go to Melissa. You know, I don't know what that looks like, but it could get ugly real quick.
Yeah. I know it's not a simple fix, but I really think that, the president, the federal government is supposed to sit on top and be the CEO, so to speak, of the Confederation of States, and the states make their rules. And I really just think that the federal government has a place in making sure that this school district over here isn't discriminating, and like federal laws, Supreme Court decisions enforcing that. Outside of that, leave us alone.
The real problem is the special education. Like not problem. That phrase came out financially. That problem is when you're forcing them to take care of a student who deserves a free education, but also requires 5 people to help take care of them.
Yeah.
And is that fair?
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that question. It's a burden, but also that child deserves it. So It's like I struggle with that because, right, I have a room full of 20 kids, and the room that's down the hall or in the building next to me has 5 adults and 4 kids.
Yeah.
Is that fair? I don't know. I don't know what the solution is.
That also, I think that's something that people who aren't involved with education don't know about as well. And some of that cost, some of that personnel expense, where you have many students at a 1-to-1 ratio. And I'm not invested enough to have an opinion on it. I agree with you. It's like, man, that sounds like there should be a better way to do that. I don't know what that is.
But we have to try something.
Yeah.
You can't, we're at this point, and this is why I think we are at a revolutionary moment, right? I think they're at one with taxes. At some point, I want to talk to you about a flat tax. Obviously, we don't have time to talk about that today. Maybe that's a Christmas break, whenever we can just talk about that on a separate podcast, a separate night. But taxes, immigration, education, and then the financial, the healthcare system, like those 4 things, like we've been trying things now for 20, 30 years. Some of them are working, some aspects are working, and then other parts are failing miserably. And I think that if you're paying attention, and I think you and I both are, or I feel this way, like this shined a bright light on the healthcare system. Regardless of the situation of the assassination, the person who murdered the CEO, it shined a bright light on it. And it shined a bright light on, like, at a certain point, when is enough money? And that sounds very socialist, right? But when is enough money too much? Like when is a company making too much money? Is there such thing? Like, what does that economically even look like? And how do we adjust that without going down the path of socialism and communism? And I don't know the answer.
Yeah, I have hope.
Me too.
Because of who Trump is, because of his demeanor, his attitude, and Trump 2.0, because of the people he's putting in place. It's like, actually, every time you have a change in leadership, especially if it's a change in leadership for the person you support with the ideology and the politics you support, or close to it, you think, okay, maybe this is the season where we can actually see some change. It's kind of like you're hopeful, but this time I actually am. Like, I think the people that are being put in place could actually make a difference. And I, for one, will be incredibly disappointed if they don't. And I think the country will too. I think if there's not progress by year 2, then you're going to see a sloshing in the midterms. And I think Trumpism and a continuation of that with another candidate, whether it's J.D. Vance, DeSantis, anybody else in 2028, is gone if they don't come in and deliver on what they're talking about and making such a big deal of and promising.
And we've talked about this before, and it doesn't have to be fast. It just has to be steps.
Yeah.
And it can be small, but I think in my adult life, right? So I'm 40. I don't remember ever feeling this hopeful after a presidential election.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, yeah.
So 2004, right after 9/11, very little hope. All my buddies are going into the military and coming back from Iraq. 2008, the economy was in the tank. 2012, Obama gets elected, and we have hope, but not necessarily aligned with my ideology. Second term, kind of the same. I didn't really feel like I was in a great place one way or the other. Then Trump's first election, I really was like, ugh, okay, we'll see how this works. I mean, it was better, and I'm saying that with a little bit of optimism now that we're a little bit further removed.
Yeah.
And then when Biden gets elected, I had no hope.
Yeah.
I just was like, all right, we just got to survive the next 4 years.
Right.
I literally remember telling my wife on not necessarily January 6th, but around the inauguration, I just remember telling her, like, we just got to survive financially. I mean, we're in a pretty stable industry, so we just got to figure out a way to get through the next 4 years, and then we'll see what happens. But now I even sense it a little bit on social media. The tone of social media seems to have lightened up a little bit. You have the far outskirts that are still very upset on both sides, because there are those on the left that are like, he's still a Nazi. And then you have those that are on the very far right that don't think he's doing enough. And so, he's crawfishing back, on some of the things he said. But I feel like a good majority of people who are sensible are, okay, let's see what happens, because he feels more presidential.
Yes.
In that interview with MSNBC, he felt presidential.
That's another thing. I think we should start a new segment, and we'll prepare for it for next time. I think we should have a Trump tweets segment. And I almost want to go back, and I want to look at Trump tweets in 2016, 2020, and now.
Do like an on this date?
Yes. What was he tweeting on this day in 16 or 17? We'll go forward with the years, okay?
Okay.
16, 20, and now 24. There is a significant and noticeable
It's a different
difference.
tone. It's a different tone. And
not that he wasn't a leader in those years. He led people, but
we're not getting the midnight tweets. We're not getting the angry tweets. We're not getting or at least not on X, maybe on Truth Social. I haven't seen it.
I mean, he'll still have some jabs and stuff.
But that's political banter.
It is.
There's a difference between political banter and mean tweets.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that...
And also just going off on people would not offer that solution. Like, whenever people would go against him, whether that be in Congress or Senate, whatever, the Democrats would hold up legislation. It's... Yeah, you can go off on Chuck Schumer, get that out of your system, get your politics out of your system, but then you got to come back with something. You got to give the Democrats, and then at that time, obviously now there's a single party control, but you got to give something to be able to accomplish something, and what you're seeing now it's a marked difference. We should start the Trump tweets.
We'll look at it. I don't. Did any of them get deleted?
No, they're archived because since he was president, they have to be archived. I don't know about the 2020 ones.
Oh, that's a good. I didn't even
Because
think
they
about
kicked
that.
him off. So remember, they kicked him off before Elon bought it.
Interesting.
Well, we might have to get a little more creative on that, but we can look at 2016 and 2024.
Because there were all. But I
Did
think
you see the cologne ad?
I didn't. You put that on there, and I didn't have a chance to look it up.
So it's a cologne ad, but it's also just some other memes. They reopened the Notre Dame Cathedral, and Trump got invited. And if you just look at all the pictures, just Google Trump Notre Dame Cathedral.
No, I did see him talking to.
Yeah, all eyes are on him.
Mm-hmm.
They show a crowd shot. Every single eye is looking at him and whoever he's talking to. He is, and he should be. I mean, he's the president-elect, right? But everyone's treating him like he's the president and like, okay, now we have a leader. And that just goes to show you that it wasn't just people on the right and conservatives saying that Biden wasn't a president, wasn't out there being presidential and leading and wasn't respected in the global community. Just look at the G20 this last time.
And he was put in the back.
Oh, man. Since
Back
when
row.
has an American president
never
sat in the back?
I mean, I don't want to say never because I don't know for sure, but.
Yeah, I don't know for sure, but no. So, and it was interesting to see. But so you have, there's a chair in between them. I don't know if that was for Biden or who, but there's a chair between Trump and Jill Biden. And she's looking at him and smiling, and they're obviously having a cordial conversation, right? And so well, the ad is something, the cologne ad is something to the effect of like, even like, make your enemies love you kind of stuff. But then the funniest one I think was find someone who looks at you like Joe Biden looks at Trump. So I'll look it up. Some good memes that came out of that. But that kind of stuff I think is hilarious. Even when it's on the other side and stuff I don't disagree with. I love a good political humor is something I enjoy. Same.
And I think that we are in a calm at the moment. Mm-hmm. And I'm thankful for that because I don't, like I said at the very beginning of this, I didn't feel calm after any of the elections in quite some time. Mm-hmm. I don't want to say stressed because my business doesn't really, my industry isn't too affected terribly by general elections like that, but I do feel a calm. And I've seen several people say like who live in New York City, hey, there's a peace over the city. There's a calmingness over the city. So I feel hopeful.
Yeah.
So any big plans this week?
No, it's kind of in that time. My job, we kind of shut down at the same time as the schools do. Nice. So I've got a couple weeks, just like you've got a couple weeks, and then a couple weeks off, and then we hit the ground running. We come back in January. So I am in wrap-up mode, just trying to get as much stuff as I can done so I can enjoy those 2 weeks.
Yeah, we're in semester 9 weeks exam mode. So at the high school, it's easy money. I mean,
my daughter's has all of her college finals. She's a junior, has all of her college finals this week.
Yeah, same.
And she only has one class that's not a dual credit. And so she's like, what am I going to do all the next week? And I'm like, I don't know what you're going to go to class.
Yeah, my daughter only has like one actual class at school that she has to attend. So like she's there all day and she basically just, I don't want to say hangs out in my room, but she hangs out in my room and does her schoolwork and then leaves at 2:30 or whatever she gets to leave.
My wife has a good friend that teaches at the high school, and my daughter hangs out in her room quite often. We get pictures and videos of her hanging out in her room. But
y'all going anywhere over the break?
No. Yeah. We'll stay home.
I think we're going to the Promise.
That'll be good.
In Glenrose. I don't think
it's been a minute since I've seen 18. That.
I think this is I've never been, so I'm kind of excited. My wife went as a teenager and a young adult, but I've never been. So I think this is the Christmas one.
Yes.
The Christmas version of it. So I'm kind of excited about it. I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah, I want to do something with the kids, but man, I am an introvert that hates traffic and crowds. So, but I want to get my work done so I can enjoy the time when the kids are off too. And I want to find a couple things that we can go to. And I like just waking up in the morning and hanging out with them and throwing the ball around and stuff like that. But I'm trying to find a couple things we can go do as a family, things like that.
Have you been to the ice thing up in
yeah. We haven't done that since we had 3 more kids. So the last time we did that, we only had 3. So the 3 littles haven't done it. That would be fun. It's so expensive. Yeah. Anything you do when you have 6 kids is expensive.
We went during COVID and they didn't have everything open.
Oh.
So I think at some point, maybe not this year, but maybe next year, something like that. We're not traveling. We're going to Glen Rose, but that's not very far from where we live. So it's just a day trip. And then we're staying overnight in a hotel and then coming back. We're such a busy phase of a season of life anyways. Like this past weekend, we literally went from Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I sent you a text message at 8 o'clock on Sunday morning. I'm like, I'm going to be here for the next 12 hours.
Sitting there looking at a volleyball court.
Which I love. I mean, I kind of half-heartedly complain about it, but I wouldn't. I mean, I really like watching my kids and being with my kids and in full dad mode, not having to be coach mode. I love coach mode, but it's a different mode for me because it's a whole different mindset. And cheering my own kid on and not having to really think too much about the strategy of the game.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's hard. So, all right, man. Have a good week.
You too, man.